Commanders make a major trade and in turn make a major announcement. They intend to be serious about this thing. Let's have a podcast. What up, everybody? It's JP Finley. It's Beltway Football. I think this is a emergency podcast. I really do. I'm joined by
Absolutely
the big
emergency
man.
pod.
Yeah, like this is a major trade for a four-time Pro Bowl corner. We wanted to get going earlier. We had a bunch of stuff going on. Me and the big man are here. Dude, as soon as you started, like, it was one of those things where there was like a whisper of it, then it became kind of a roar, and then it was like, yo, this happened. And Marshon Lattimore is traded. We'll go through the compensation. Let's start with, though, the Commanders just got the best corner available on the market. It was their weakest position group. It was what they needed to address more than anything else. He immediately, whether he's 80, 90% of the dude that is a four-time Pro Bowler, the rookie of the year, all those things, he's immediately their top corner. From everybody I've talked to, they think he's going to get healthy in a real hurry. Obviously, health's a question. Health's a part of this. But this seems like an absolute power move by Washington and an announcement that, yo, we are serious. We're serious about competing now. We're serious about competing in the future. And I think Commanders fans should be fired up.
Absolutely, they should be fired up. When this season started, Dan Quinn and Adam Peters talked about this being not a rebuild, but a recalibration. Forget the recalibration. The recalibration is no longer about the football team. The recalibration is fans, media, everyone watching what this team is doing, because they put their foot on the table and said, we are going for this thing. We are a real contender, and we're going to do what we can to get there. And it's so impressive to watch this front office work, because they work, for the most part, quietly, under the radar. Like you said, it started off with Schefter the other day saying players want to come to Washington. And then it kind of was the Saints are open to trading this kid. And then it was the Commanders and whoever else are involved in it. And then boom, the news was there, and they made this deal. And the trade is not just that Marcus Lattimore is a very good player in and of himself. It's what he can do for the rest of this defense. Because when you bring in a number one corner, you can now move Benjamin St-Juste to the number 2 spot, to the other side. He's no longer being asked to do quite as much as he was. And I think he'll be in a position where he can be more successful. Mikey Sainristil, who's having to work on the outside.
Slot. Yep.
Back to the slot. And Sainristil was doing some good work on the outside. It's not that he's only a slot corner. So this isn't a knock on him in any way, shape, or form. That's just where he's going to be more comfortable. That's where he's going to be able to have a bigger impact. And when you're able to have a corner with the ability that Marshon Lattimore has, you think about all the different machinations on the defense. They don't have to worry about necessarily having a deep safety over top of them every time. That frees them up to maybe move Jeremy Chin down in the box to help out the run a little bit more. A player of this magnitude helps everybody on the defensive side of the football, not just the corners, not just the outside, not just the safeties.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they'll be able to play more single high now. If you look specifically at the Ravens game and then that Giants game just this past week, early on in that game, New York's able to run the ball like crazy. Second half, they make an adjustment, but then Neighbors is able to kind of catch a ton underneath, right? If you go back to the first half against Baltimore, they sold out to slow down Derrick Henry. Zay Flowers just carves him up with all the little underneath stuff. Second half, they try to slow down Zay Flowers. Henry's able to carve him up. I'm not saying they slow down the Ravens offense, but like they can have different decisions against the Giants. And this thing happens right away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you want to hear something?
As far as the injury stuff, real quick, like Devontae Adams was sitting out with a hamstring injury, and then all of a sudden shows up in New York, and he's miraculously heals and is ready to go. I'm not saying that Lattimore's in that world, but this thing, if it was a big time injury or something that the team was worried about, I don't think that they're making this deal if they don't think he can help them almost immediately.
All right, something very funny. It is timestamp guy, 8:08 p.m. We wanted to get this done earlier. We weren't able to. I meant to text my wife because my house is a mess. We just got the kids down. I usually clean up when we're getting the kids down, but I texted her, I will clean up when I get done. Sorry, just needed to get this done ASAP, talking about the podcast, right? Instead of texting that to Lauren, I texted it to a high up PR person. You and I both know.
That is pretty funny.
So I just
Were you
followed up
offering
with
to
you.
go? Were
I
you
just
offering to
followed
go
up
over to
with
their house?
no. I don't know how that's going to be construed. I followed up with yo. Sorry, that was for my wife. LOL. So hopefully that'll handle that. I think surface level, this is something Commanders fans should be really excited for. I think it helps defensively a ton. I think we know what Joe Witt and Dan Quinn have been defensively. I think defensively they're playing okay. I think they're fine, kind of good. I think this allows them to maybe be good. We don't know exactly what Lattimore has left, but like you said, he's missed the injuries are perhaps a real concern. He has missed a ton of time, hasn't played a full season since 21. In his last full season, though, he was a Pro Bowler, and he's missed a little bit of time. I think coming here right away, he hits the ground running, and I think we see a similar Devontae Adams hamstring automatic healing process, right? I think that Saints thing had gone completely sideways and guys wanted out, etc.
They just fired their coach. Yeah, things went
Yeah, they
sideways.
fired their coach at 2-7. Now you're at a 7-2 team where Schefter's telling the world people want to be here. You've got one of the most exciting young quarterbacks in the NFL. Like it's an entirely different beast. They kind of need him to hit the ground running because you got Pittsburgh and then Philly. George Pickens, the Steelers just traded for Mike Williams, whatever he's got left. Philly, obviously, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. They need a corner. They need a CB1. Now they've got one. It's a really exciting piece. For me, it's more big picture because they're 7-2. They're in the 2 seed behind Detroit. Philly's on their heels. They're not going away. They appear to have ridden out the Sirianni storm. This is a move that is telling of we think we could contend. Also, Lattimore's under contract for 2 more years. He's only 28. He turns 29 in May, I think. Like this is not a all in right now. There's no future with this because this is both a short term and a long term thing. But I think when you dive in even further to the compensation, it starts to look really good.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, New Orleans got a third, fourth, and sixth. Washington got Lattimore in a fifth. The sixth that they sent to New Orleans was the John Ridgway sixth that they got from him during training camp, right at the cut day. The third that they sent him is the Commanders' third, which obviously right now is looking at a back half of the draft, picks 25 plus
Right
or so.
now on Tankathon, they would have the 29th pick. And that Dolphins pick, the third rounder that they got for Dotson from Philly, but it's the Dolphins pick they have, would be 8th. There's 8 games left. A lot of things could change, but that's a big old gap. That's 20 spots of draft worth gap.
I mean, it's Lattimore and a fifth for a fourth, essentially. I mean, it's not exactly apples to apples, but give or take, that's what the comp is. And we talked about last week when we were talking about this trade deadline that we didn't expect them to give up major compensation. And while on paper, this looks 3, 4, 6, 3 draft picks for it, when you start breaking down kind of what it is, it's not really as much comp as it looked like initially.
From a straight like player perspective, I mean, you could kind of consider it Dotson, John Ridgway, because the 6th they got was when they traded Ridgway to the Saints. They got a 6th back. So before the season started, so it's Dotson and Ridgway because they're literally just returning New Orleans their 6th rounder for Ridgway, and
Right.
the 4th for Lattimore in the 5th, and then that their 3rd is going to be pretty. We're saying the same thing. I think when you first saw it, it's like and then when you look at it again, they went from 4 picks in the top 100 to still having 3 picks in the top 100 and probably
Right.
3 picks in the top 80. And then you add a corner that's been a Pro Bowler 4 times.
Exactly. I mean, there have been a ton of Lattimore stats that have been put out there. The one that he hasn't given up a touchdown in man-to-man coverage since 2021. Granted, there's a lot of missed game time in there, but that's pretty damn impressive. And I think when you look at, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, Joe Witt was talking, and it basically said like, hey, we've had to adjust the scheme to the players that we have when we were talking about Jimmys and Joes, not X's and O's. And I think
Players,
you can
not plays.
draw a direct line from that presser and that conversation to today's trade for Lattimore, because Marcus Lattimore, even at an 80%, Marcus Lattimore is a player that can allow them to do some of the things that they were doing in Dallas before they got here, when they had Trayvon Diggs or they had Deron Bland, who were, guys that you could leave one-on-one and then use kind of use the other 10 guys in a more creative way, because they are guys that can at times lock down a side of the football field. I'm excited to see what it's going to mean. He's a guy that isn't afraid to stick his head in there and and be a little bit physical. He's also obviously he strikes me as a Dan Quinn, Joe Witt guy when you think about him and Mike Evans and the back and forths and the guy who's
Competitor.
like willing to
Totally.
step up and get after it. Competitor, perfect, the word I was looking for. I'm
Yeah.
excited about what this thing can look like, and he's going to be a big addition to this defense.
And I don't care that much about this because these kids go to college all over the world or all over the country. You know what I mean? But it doesn't hurt that he was on that same Ohio State team as Terry and Noah Brown. Like they know what they're signing up for. And you guys come from Columbia University or UNC Greensboro, or they can come from Ohio State or LSU. That doesn't determine what you will be in the pros, but like there is some familiarity here, which I think matters. And on a surface level, I trust. Like DQ was asked about, hey, Peters runs the drafts and the trades and all that, but eventually he brings you in. Like, what is your involvement? And Quinn explained, he's like, there's layers to it, and those guys are going to work the phones, dude. It's like when you're dating a girl, you don't introduce them to your parents on the first or second date, but after like 4 or 5 dates, they might meet mom and dad, right? Like Dan Quinn probably fielded 100 phone calls, and probably seven of those, I'm sorry, Adam Peters probably fielded 100 phone calls, and probably 6 or 7 of those got to a conversation with DQ about like, how do we feel? How does this work? Clearly, this one got all the way there, and I trust DQ and Joe Witt to make especially corner evaluations.
Right. And that I think, to me, that's one of the big points about all this, is that you have two guys that have developed young corners and turned them into Marcus Lattimore type players. Marcus is a little bit older than some of those guys, but you go back to his defensive rookie of the year in whatever it was, 2017. And, they've developed guys into that type of player. And now they get almost a plug and play kid that they can bring in. And, he already has the skill set, the ball skills, the different things that they look for in corners. And it's going to be, they never had a true number one corner, which I think we can all, realistically talk about and agree. And this is something that is going to help the defense
Not in a
across the
long
board.
time, right? For sure.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, of
dude,
course. I meant Dan Quinn and Joe Witt don't have a number one corner in
right.
Washington until now.
Totally. And one thing we talk about a lot is like the infrastructure on the offensive side of the ball. We talk about Brian Johnson and Anthony Lynn and Kingsbury, and then going down the list, you got David Blau and Tamita Pritchard, and even a guy like David Rise, a former quarterback. Like we talk about that all the time. There is real buzz around Jason Simmons, who is,
Yeah.
you think about Joe Witt, but Simmons is the defensive pass game coordinator. They always credit Pagano. Witt always brings up Pagano when he's talking about kind of defensively what they do. Like they also have some real structure built in for DBs, and Tommy Donatel. Like all these dudes get mentioned very highly, and I think whether Lattimore needs it or not, like he's going to come into a structure that's well built. I want to get into some other things, some reactionary stuff here, but let's do this. I'm going to give you 4 options, and you have 100 chips between the 4 options. Okay?
All right.
All right. So trade deadline move. This all came down about 1 o'clock. Trade deadline was about 4 o'clock. We're recording at 8:15. Your options are the Lattimore trade is a home run. The Lattimore trade is a ground rule double. The Lattimore trade is an out, just a ground out to short, or it's a GIVP. Like it sucks. Ground into a double play. You get 100 chips between those 4 options.
I think I'll go 70 chips on a ground rule double. I'll do 20 chips on a home run, 25 chips on a home run. I think the hamstring injury is the difference between those two numbers being flip-flopped. 70 and 25 is 95. So I have five left, and I'd throw five onto a ground and double play. And those five are basically the injury
Hammy.
is more severe than we think, or he re-injures it right away, something along those lines, and it turns out to be a swing and a miss. But overwhelmingly, I think that this is a good move. Where are your 100 chips?
I'm close to you. I think we both want to acknowledge that you've got a speed guy with a hamstring. And at
Right.
some point, there was a real hamstring thing. Whether it is right now is debatable. But that is a real thing. I think I'm going to allow a little more leeway here. I'll go like, we're in pretty much the same ballpark. I was going to say 65 ground rule double, 25 home run. That gets me to 90, right? You know what? Maybe there is no out. Like maybe the only downside is bad because like what would constitute an out versus a GIDP? Probably if it's an out, it's a GIDP.
Well, I think a GIDP is injury, hamstring injury. We don't really see him play, whereas an out would be maybe he gets out there and isn't very good.
Yeah, you're right. 60, 20, 10, 10. Right? I think you got to allow
Yeah.
for you like we don't pander on this podcast. So we will allow that there, but
Right.
I'm still telling you there's an 80% chance of a double or a home run. And you're at
Right. Maybe I was a little
95%
aggressive
chance.
with it, but
No, but
I might have been a little aggressive, but I'm excited about it. And honestly, almost right away, you mentioned the Steelers trading for Mike Williams. In a perfect world, if this had happened in the offseason and we're in week 9 and Mike Williams is established and Marshon Lattimore is established, it's almost a perfect, wide receiver DB matchup situation where you have George Pickens, who's your speed guy, quick guy, wants to get downfield, lined up with Marshon Lattimore long. Then you have Mike Williams, who's kind of your big body guy, not entirely quick, not entirely fast, not the best route runner, just kind of a big body, and he does a good job of getting himself in position against Benjamin St-Juste, who's a big bodied corner who tries to use his size to get in position. It's going to be a pretty equal matchup on both sides of the ball with these teams, with these DBs versus wide receivers, and then obviously immediately 4 days later you have the Eagles and you have Devontae Smith, and obviously we don't know what AJ Brown's injury situation is going to be, but I'm going to assume that he's going to be okay for that game. And you have a big body receiver and a quick receiver, so they have on the DB side for the Commanders. Now you have Moore, who's your speed guy. You have Benjamin St-Juste, who's your more size guy, and you can kind of match up with a couple different types of receivers now. Whereas before, you were really kind of hamstrung, no pun intended, by what you had in the secondary.
yeah, I'm with you. So that you bring me to a